little slow.
It's 8:57, but due to inflation, it's closer to 9 o'clock.
What's the date?
Yeah, right.
Now affected our time.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Good.
Yes, ready when you are.
Councilpersons, are you ready? Everybody ready? Ready. Very good. Good morning, everyone. And it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the very first City Council workshop of 2023. This is, of course, the City of Palm Coast Council Workshop. Today is Tuesday, January the 10th, 2023. It is 9 a.m. and we are in the community wing of City Hall. And let me just share with the opening comment that I can't tell you how excited and enthusiastic and optimistic I am about all of the opportunities that present themselves to our City Council as we start this first meeting this year. And with that, I would ask you all to please rise and join me with our Pledge of Allegiance. And if the clerk would call the roll, please.
Mayor Alfin.
Present.
Vice Mayor Danko.
Here.
Councilmember Carly Pontieri.
Present.
Councilmember Hyder. Present. Councilmember Clufus.
Present.
All members are present.
Thank you. We move to item D on the agenda, public participation. In order for city staff to be able to respond to your questions or concerns, please fill out a comment card with your contact information. The comment cards can be found on the table near the agendas or available from the Communications and Marketing Director seated in the back. Public participation shall be held in accordance with Section 286.0114 Florida statutes and pursuant to the City Council's meeting policies and procedures. Each speaker shall at the podium provide their name and may speak for up to 3 minutes. The public may provide comments to the City Council relative to matters not on the agenda at the times indicated in this agenda. Following any comments from the public, there may be discussion by the City Council. When addressing the City Council on specific enumerated agenda items, speakers shall direct all comments to the mayor, make their comments concise and to the point, not speak more than once on the same subject, not by speech or otherwise delay or interrupt the proceedings or the peace of the City Council. Obey the orders of the mayor or the City Council and not make any irrelevant, impertinent, slanderous comments while addressing the City Council, which pursuant to council rules shall be considered disorderly. Any person who becomes disorderly or who fails to confine his or her comments to the identified subject or business shall be cautioned by the mayor and thereafter must conclude his or her remarks on the subject within the remaining designated time limit. Any speaker failing to comply as cautioned shall be barred from making any additional comments during the meeting and may be removed as necessary for the remainder of the meeting. Members of the public may make comments during the public comment portion of the meeting. Please be advised that public comment will only be permitted during the public comment portions of the agenda at the times indicated by the chair during the meeting. So with that, I would move to agenda item E, which is our presentations. And the first presentation up this morning is the Strategic Action Plan Evaluation Update. And in order to underline my opening comments on the enthusiasm and the excitement that I feel about our City Council and the coming year, I do have some prepared comments to share. So let me go ahead and just read them to you. The strategic action planning process has successfully served our City Council for more than 10 years. It is a cornerstone and fundamental building block of the annual budget process. The SAP process is a bottoms-up or Lego-type build. The budget is reviewed and refined by council to achieve a financially conservative and efficient use of taxpayer dollars. Each council member has promoted and committed themselves to fiscal conservancy. The SAP process does not benefit from council demands for generalized reductions or across-the-board cuts to the budget. This is contrary to staff's responsibility to identify council priorities that define the new year's vision. It is staff's responsibility to execute council's vision with resources approved by council for the coming year's budget. The SAP process is dependent on assembling each council member's programs and initiatives to define a vision for city staff to budget. City council vision is an ongoing process built on past and current council priorities and initiatives. It is important to note that the 2023-2024 vision is the result of a dynamic and ongoing planning process incorporating past budget items in various stages of completion. It is therefore not possible to transition from SAP to budget to tax rates by simply applying broad-stroked and generalized instructions to staff to arbitrarily reduce expense categories. The strategic action plan process clearly requires a detailed bottom-up budgeting approach that offers staff clear direction to adjust specific budget line items to align with past and present priorities. Additions to the current vision may require reductions in other service expenses to avoid increasing tax liability. Millage rate is the arithmetic calculation used to determine ad valorem tax revenue necessary to accommodate council vision. Council should be cautious about using millage rate generalizations that disrupt the bottom-up or budget building process. Staff is not responsible for budgeting the programs that define City Council's vision. The city charter clearly assigns the responsibility of vision to this City Council. It is my intention to accept our council responsibility for achieving a financially conservative budget that supports council's vision with the least tax liability to residents possible. I will ask each council member to be specific in identifying services and programs that should be increased or decreased, added, removed, canceled, or delayed, achieving a unanimous collaboration of support for our 2023-24 budget approval. It is our responsibility to debate and collaborate on programs and expenditures that fulfill our collective vision and meet our unanimously agreed to commitment to approving a financially conservative budget. Those are my thoughts and comments, and with that, I would invite our Assistant City Manager, Ms. Lauren Johnston, to begin her presentation.
Mayor, just for the record, I'm sorry, maybe I missed it. Were there any public comment for the first public participation period?
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. My mistake.
Oh.
So let's now do public comment.
You read the public comment, and then I didn't look up to see if there was any, so.
My name is Jim Patochik. On behalf of the Cimarron Safety Group, I would like to thank Mayor Elfin for his kind words in the Palm Coast Observer regarding Al Cryer. Al passed away suddenly on December 24th. Al was the inspiration and lead for the Cimarron Safety Group. He diligently worked to get the city approval for a walk/bikeway path along Cimarron Drive for the safety of pedestrians. He and his team walked the streets of the C-section, met people for discussion, and had petitions signed which were given to the city. The Cimarron Safety Group will continue to work with the city as appropriate to make Al's dream, our dream, come true. Cheers to people like Al Cryer within our community that volunteer to make a positive influence in Palm Coast. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any other members of the public that would like to address City Council at this time? Seeing no one come forward, I will close this portion of the agenda for public comment and move forward now to agenda item E, which is presentations. And Ms. Johnston, if you would begin with the presentation for the Strategic Action Plan Evaluation Update.
Yes, good morning, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for that introduction, Mayor, about our Strategic Action Plan process. This is a feedback and update presentation to provide council with information on where each priority is in the process before we enter into next steps. And just to go over that upcoming timeline with you, council, we're here today to provide you with a Q1 update on the priorities. You will notice on your calendars that we have scheduled interviews with our SAP team and yourself to conduct those one-on-one listening sessions to hear more about where you see the priorities being added, deleting, modifying, and adjusting our SAP for the next process. We'll bring those listening sessions and feedback for Evaluation 1 on March 28th. This is a special workshop. And its process is to go not only through the SAP, but also some upcoming budgeted items. Then we'll make sure we heard you correctly by coming forth on a SAP evaluation number 2, which is also going to be another special workshop. We will then adopt those priorities on May 2nd, and then provide you with information on how those priorities can be accomplished and what financial budgeted impacts they will have on June 27th, which is a special workshop as well. We reaffirmed our core beliefs in last year's SAP, with our values being pride, accountability, leadership, and motivated. Also, collaborative, ownership, achievement, stewardship, and trust. And if you don't know, it spells Palm Coast. We reaffirmed our mission, delivering exceptional service by making citizens our priority. A special initiative from our city manager this year has been to develop a customer service team, where our efforts are focused on making sure every citizen receives the same service, no matter what service they're acquiring from the city, whether that's our median folks or our customer service. We want everybody to be a proud Palm Coast employee, and we want that feeling to resonate with our residents. Our City Council's vision is a multi-generational community recognized as one of Florida's premier cities, and that values building a diverse, sustainable economic base to support innovation while providing necessary infrastructure and services, providing exceptional amenities and standards that support a high-quality lifestyle, and protecting the environment and the beauty of Palm Coast while conserving natural resources. And through your SAP one-on-ones, we'll confirm this vision, this mission, and these values as well. Our pillars of priorities, we look at this as being our house that holds and stands us up, and each of the upcoming priorities align with one of the following pillars. They also drive our level of service and our key performance indicators that monitor our operational progress. Those pillars being strong, resilient economy, safe and reliable services, civic engagement, and sustainable environment and infrastructure. And we again will confirm these pillars of priorities through the one-on-one process. We're going to jump right into the first priority, being in our strong, resilient economy pillar. Town Center should promote and partner with well-known higher education institutions to become a regional center for learning. Partnerships will be enhanced by a home for arts and culture, offering opportunities for performance, display, creative expression, and training. An objective here is to evaluate Town Center land for potential acquisition of open space to meet the need of future growth. And our progress to date so far has been, we've created an Arts District Steering Group, and we've continued to be underway with stakeholder meetings. Those stakeholder meetings have developed into working on a master plan. We hosted the first annual Fall Arts Festival in conjunction with the organization United We Art and other local arts organization. It was a great and popular event by our community. And we've also enhanced the criteria for our cultural arts grants. In a projected outcome, you'll soon hear about an arts and cultural vision for Palm Coast in a city council meeting anticipated February of this year. Our next priority is Palm Coast brands itself as a future regional destination for healthcare training complemented by research, technology, innovation while fostering relationships. Our progress to date has been we continue to meet with community, hospital, and higher education institution and stakeholders. We've identified geographical areas for healthcare facility growth and new business recruitment. We've strengthened our relationships with sector professionals. And a projected outcome here is that we will continue to work to conduct an in-depth healthcare industry feasibility study, which will provide the data and validate the healthcare industry as a viable industry to pursue. The study will identify the optimum sectors for growth in Palm Coast, the assets and infrastructure required, associated costs, a roadmap for implementation, as well as a concept master plan and center of excellence. Our next priority is strengthen and maintain relationships with key stakeholders through a recurring meetings and proactive approaches to further key initiatives. An objective here is staff should provide City Council with a list of stakeholders and top 10 biggest employers and periodic communications on relationship feedback. Quarterly meetings are being tracked and feedback is in the City Manager's weekly report. And projected outcomes here is we continue to provide City Council a tracking sheet on an annual basis, and we do publish the top 10 employers in the annual budget book. The next priority is develop an economic opportunity tools and communication strategies to enhance the need for regional growth. Create a portfolio and make available for businesses when they inquire about locating to our community, and focus on green and clean industry. So far, we have created a template for a portfolio, identified geographical areas to support new business relocations and growth, evaluated current zoning and the need for rezoning to support industry diversification and new business. Business survey template is in development. And our economic development manager has attended local business networking events and projected and meeting with existing businesses. She's been very busy and has hit the ground running as soon as she walked in the door. Some projected outcomes are a printable and digital portfolio, a recruitment and retention plan, and a white paper on the benefits associated with forming an industrial development authority. Okay, our next priority is the westward expansion is guided by master planning for smart managed growth. Economic development is driven by town center regional destination initiatives. Economic growth and community marketing are supported by competitive youth sport activity centers, catering to young athletes, families, and fans across from regional and distance locations. We are working on doing a youth sports complex feasibility study. The draft of that report should be done here soon on phase 1. We're working on a green print discussion with our West landowner, and that has been initiated. We're working on the conservation easement release submitted to the Water Management District. We've had conversations with FEC Railroad for flyover and right-of-way, and we've had several technical meetings with FDOT to support funding requests. And a projected outcomes here is a conceptual master plan of Matanzas Woods flyover area. We will secure funding and commence construction. We will deliver a youth sports activity center feasibility study. And in collaboration of Council Priority C2, staff will work in conjunction with local recreation needs and regional impacts. And that has been kicked off as well. Our next priority is inventory, assess, identify optimal use of city land assets. In a great Palm Coast fashion, we created a team to work on this project, and that team is comprised from several different individuals from different departments that have ownership in this priority. We created a land assets evaluation map. We worked with IT and GIS to create a map identifying inventory all city-owned property. The team assigned, identify and current proposed use of city property and identify excess lands. And the projected outcomes here is assess existing conditions, including but not limited to drainage, environmental, and encumbrances, and analyze of optimal use of city-owned properties. And this completion year should be this summer is when we anticipate completing this priority. Another priority here in Strong Resilient Economy is to ensure continued smart, sustainable, long-term growth. With the City of Palm Coast, staff will develop a timeline and propose a budget accordingly to conduct a comprehensive evaluation and appraisal report, an EAR, analysis to update the horizon to 2045. And in fiscal year 22, staff shall conduct a survey, and I believe that was completed. So our progress to date is, again, in great organizational fashion. We created a team. We've had several pre-planning meetings, and we're currently reviewing other municipal outreach programs. I was just in a meeting last week, and we've also created an RFP to go out to bid for help with a study on this. A projected outcome is to engage a facilitator team to conduct a series of neighborhood meetings between the city residents and city staff regarding the future growth of Palm Coast, including any type of residential dwelling units, and then we'll complete a community dialogue and vision report that will serve as the building block for updating the goals, objectives, and policies in the comprehensive plan. So we're going to move on to our next pillar, which is civic engagement. And in this pillar, we have the priority, in the spirit of the Arts District, create an arts program with community partners for original blue and white neighborhood entry signs to transform them into art in public places. Objectives here being program proposals should focus on enhancing the visual appeal, focus on a modern, classy, easy to read, and pleasant to the eye style. Evaluate the process and address funding sources for this project. This is a modified priority for fiscal year 23. It hasn't quite gotten off the ground yet. We're hoping to present to City Council an existing master plan and funding options for artistic program. We do have a neighborhood and arterial sign master plan that was established back in 2012, and so we hope to be able to update the council on where that plan is, and through the budget process show you the funding strategies that could be in place. Our next priority is seek out opportunities to engage Flagler County students on civic programs. We're working collaboratively with Flagler schools on creating a field trip for 7th graders to learn more about local government, activities to include a mock council meeting and tour of city facilities. We're anticipating a spring field trip with Flagler students. And then also we're working in conjunction with Flagler schools to do a city showcase of departments and recruit graduating students. And that's also projected this spring. And then our projected outcomes being students achieve a better understanding of civics and engage with the City of Palm Coast. Our next priority is staff to provide an inventory of potential facilities according to the public renaming policy in honor of Mayor John Netz. Progress to date being we've completed an inventory of potential sites for potential renaming, and we completed an inventory of sites and facilities already renamed. We are working with the family to make sure that Mayor Netz is properly recognized. And our projected outcomes is to come back to this council bringing a presentation of the renaming policy, including the potential sites and those already named. For This next priority, research other cities' communication strategies on how they respond in proactive and reactive manners with social media applications. Progress to date is our communications department is an active board member of the local Florida Public Relations Association to collaborate with other cities on best practices. They've hosted 2 in-person quarterly meetings with local communication professionals from Flagler County, FCSO, Flagler Beach, Health Department, and Flagler Schools. And they're conducting a cost-benefit analysis on social media listening services. Projected outcomes here being increased engagement with residents, increased educational opportunities, and creating a model path for success for future communication efforts. We're moving on to a different pillar, this being safe and reliable services. Our priority here is ensure that the maintenance and operations facility is the top priority facility project and commence with initial improvements based on the capital improvement plan timeline. For fiscal year 21 and 22, the master plan was presented by City Council and approval of plan and design. Construction management contracts were obtained and that is complete. And then we are currently in the design of phase 1. Projected outcomes here is updating the capital improvement plan annually, updating construction costs and revenues updates, seek construction management firm and design consultant team and bring contracts to City Council, schematic design to be presented by City Council, and we should commence with the fleet facility this fiscal year. The next priority is identify local recreation demands, example being aquatics, fields, senior services, etc., to balance the need of regional activity centers. Staff shall provide a branding outline that represents the community recreation needs for the southern extent of the city, and also prioritize projects on the Parks and Recreation Capital Improvement Plan. We have created steering meetings between the county and city, and the Parks Master Plan details were approved by City Council on December 13th, and the staff presented the rebranding of the Southern Recreation Center on June 28th. And the projected outcomes here being staff will present a collaborative approach with Flagler County on a comprehensive countywide recreation master plan, and in that it will provide opportunity to provide prioritize projects in the CIP. The next priority is seek opportunities for the community center to help relieve parking pressures through the following approaches. Evaluate the utilization of the community center playground, basketball courts, and tree area for additional parking. Conducting a detailed analysis of city-owned lands and facilities in the vicinity of the community center to determine optimal use value. And another objective here was to look into the repurpose of Fire Station 22 to preserve historical value and expand visitor awareness of Palm Coast. This is a collaborative project between the fire department and Parks and Recreation. They have completed an analysis of the playground and basketball court, an evaluation with current conditions of Fire Station 22 with cost estimates, and complete draft drawings of the new parking lot. The team will bring back to this council a final analysis with recommendations, and that should be on your workshop agenda coming to you shortly. Another priority is to, on high-value service contracts, provide adequate quality control to ensure contractual compliance. Progress to date is we created a residential collection supervisor and was hired on October 1 to oversee the solid waste division of Public Works. New requests will be reviewed on an as-needed basis by the city manager. And just to reaffirm, the city administration will evaluate organizational alignment on high-value service contracts. The next priority is develop a comprehensive cybersecurity plan to focus on safety and security of all infrastructure and critical functions. Our progress to date is we have formalized a staffing plan, and email phishing training has started. Our projected outcomes here is staff recommends moving this priority to operations, and information can be requested on an as-needed basis, and that's due to the nature of protecting our security. The next priority is to collaborate with FPL and other stakeholders to provide electric vehicles fast charging stations across multiple locations in the city and engage local interest in expanding opportunities. This is an amazing project for our new light team, and that stands for Leadership Intern Training Experience. That's being led by our city manager. The team will present their findings at the conclusion of their project, and we're anticipating this summer around May. The next priority and in a pillar of sustainable environment and infrastructure is to conduct a solar feasibility study and expand the scope to include solar retrofits for current and future facilities and seek out grant opportunities. Progress to date is an ROI analysis for the Southern Recreation Center was completed and presented to council in fiscal year 22. The ROI evaluated 2 options. City Council directed staff to include the quicker ROI payback, but to design the ability to expand and add battery storage in the future. The option was included as a part of the GMP amendment for construction. And our projected outcomes here being to complete an ROI for the Maintenance Operations Center, the MOC design of scope of work, and an analysis for city's existing facilities will only be completed upon the review of the ROI findings from the Racket Center and MOC projects and council's direction. The next priority is through a multifaceted approach, including TPO, collaboration with city lobbyists, and direct communication with our legislative team to encourage the inclusion of Phase 2 and Phase 3 of Old Kings Road widening in the FDOT 5-year work plan. And this was adopted by the Northeast Florida Regional Council as a legislative priority. It was also included in our local legislative priority document and presented at the Flagler Legislation Delegation meeting on December 19th. And projected outcomes here being develop a comprehensive strategy to obtain funding. Our last priority is develop a plan for maintenance of the saltwater canals. Progress to date is in February of 22, staff advertised an RSFQ to conduct a saltwater canal study. Staff will seek council approval for engineering services related to Phase 1. This is on your agenda for today. Projected outcomes will determine source of funding, summary report assessing seawall conditions, conduct a bathymetric survey, sediment analysis, and feasibility for additional dredging and recommendations for dredge material management. And that concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to ask or answer any questions.
Thank you for your extensive presentation. So this is really day 1 of the budgeting process, which will take, give or take, 8 months, and culminate in, final decisions on, tax rates and all of that. So this is a workshop, so this is an ideal time to, I think, ask some questions or make comments. If you'll permit me, I have one question right up front regarding the priority involving the comprehensive plan. Has the city in its history ever undertaken a complete review of the comprehensive plan?
I'm gonna phone a friend, either Miss Bevan or if Chief of Staff, Mr. DiLorenzo, could answer.
I see Jose Papa coming to the podium. He orchestrates many of these efforts to stay in compliance, so I'll just turn it over to Mr. Papa to answer the question.
Sure. We've done periodic updates and overhauled the comprehensive plan, specifically as mandated by the state, which is every 7 years with the evaluation and appraisal report. So we did one, I believe, in I can't remember the dates anymore, but we've done it more than once. And also in 2010, when we were working with the landowners with the annexation of lands west of the railroad tracks, we took that time as an opportunity to update some of the data and analysis that were in the comprehensive plan in terms of population projection, projection on the demands on infrastructure, and took that time to include new objectives and policies regarding development of lands out west.
Okay, so This is really a first for City Council to make a strategic priority of reviewing the entire comprehensive plan at one time, not for a specific outcome. And the reason I bring it up is this crosses over to one of the other pillars, which is community engagement, because it's my understanding that the public will be invited in over this lengthy process to participate in updating and commenting on the comprehensive plan. Is that your understanding?
Yes, sir, that is absolutely correct. We've done the skeleton of a potential public outreach plan. And we're going to include that as part of our RFSQ to solicit the assistance of a consulting firm who will then help us to refine that. But basically that public outreach plan will serve as the basis for how do we reach out to the public? Special events, through surveys, through online meetings, in whatever way possible that we can reach the greatest number of our residents. Those who might not want to go out might be in favor of doing an online meeting. Those who go to special events but maybe not pay attention to email blasts, we will be able to reach them. We will go to them through special events. We will have, like I said, and some of the more typical ones, we'll hold a workshop and invite the community, announce it in the papers and through social media. But various ways, again, as Mrs. Johnson already mentioned, we're coordinating with other municipalities and how they did their outreach when they updated their comprehensive plan.
So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the last comment especially because I failed to mention that. So in addition to our comprehensive plan, we'll, I would think for the first time, and City Manager, correct me if I'm wrong, be thinking in terms of regionality of our comprehensive plan as well.
Absolutely, Mayor, right on point.
Okay, all right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Papa. Vice Mayor, any comments for today's kind of first blush?
Well, excuse me. As you said, this is day one, and I know for three of us, we've done this before, but we have two new members that probably have a lot of questions. So the one question I had, you already asked, Mr. Mayor, and I have no other input at this moment. Good, thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Ms. Johnson, for the presentation. I do have a couple questions, as you surmised, Councilman Danko. First, in all of these priorities, will we be able to see a more detailed kind of milestone schedule for some of these? Because a lot of these are very broad. So to kind of, for lack of a better phrase, eat the elephant, be able to really have a schedule of milestones that are underneath each one of these very broad priorities so that we know what we've accomplished and what we're still working towards.
Yes, ma'am. All of the priorities have what we call action agendas, what really breaks it down in where we've accomplished the priority and what the future is. Not only that, but it breaks down what type of resources we need, whether it's staffing, who the staff is, and also any outside external costs. So each priority has one of those action agendas, and those can be provided to the council.
Awesome, thank you. And then also, during the presentation, you talked about a survey that was supposed to be completed fiscal year 2022. Will that be made accessible to the public? And then any future surveys that are done also be made accessible to the public?
Yes, we have those as our records, so we can provide those or make them public, whether they're on our website or what have you. We can make those public.
I would encourage maybe that being part of a presentation in a workshop in the future, just so that our residents are aware of what their fellow community members are expressing as wants and needs for the community as we develop.
Okay.
And then I know we're meeting individually with the team, the SAP team, and having one-on-ones, and I look forward to doing that. I would just encourage my fellow council members and city staff to really kind of determine what in these priorities should be more appropriate as SOPs, so just standards of practice. I know, just for instance, one example is meeting with our top 10 employers in the city. I think that should just be something that we do. Our economic development team should want to meet with these top 10 employers, and rather than keeping it as what could be potentially a perpetual priority, which is an oxymoron, making it an SOP for the city so that it's just something that we do as a city to further our economic development plan each year. So as we're going through these and really trying to remain hyper-focused on actual priorities, determining kind of different buckets for these goals that we have for our community. So as we engage in this, I would just kind of encourage that overall thought process. Thank you.
Councilperson Hyder?
Yes, thank you, Lauren, for that presentation. Mayor, you pretty much kind of hit on the question and concern that I would have had. My question would have been, how much of public participation would residents in our community have in the decision-making process for this comprehensive plan? I think that they should be included. I know often I hear from our residents and our community that we don't know what's going on. So I think that it's very important that our community and our residents of City of Palm Coast are included in this decision-making process.
Yes, ma'am, and just to echo that, for that specific priority, the city has a team comprised of planning staff, our communications director, Parks and Recreation. Ms. McDermott, who's leading our Parks Master Plan team, is also sitting on the Comprehensive Plan team, because we know that those two elements will converge, and we want to make sure that, you know, we go to where the people are, and part of that is being in our parks and recreation services, so we are looking at that as a comprehensive approach.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilman?
Absolutely. Thank you for the presentation. Being part of our council that has kind of helped facilitate the construction of these goals, I would just encourage everyone, not only our new members, but our staff is incredibly great at including ideas like our individual initiatives that we want to bring forward, incorporating them into existing goals. One of mine is the solar feasibility report. The team has done a tremendous job at kind of being able to integrate that into an existing project to maximize the dollars that are being spent to go around, so that, you know, we're not spending $100,000 here and $100,000 here when we combine the same thing and do it in one project. The staff has done an incredibly great job, and I'm thankful for all their hard work. And I just encourage, when you have any ideas, anything that is an individual initiative, let them know as soon as possible, and they can incorporate it into one of our broader goals. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, I think you have, pronounced the optimism and enthusiasm I have for this council working together with your and city manager's staff to get us, the best SAP that the city has ever seen before. So we look forward to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We are excited as an organization and also as a team, the SAP team, to lead you into the SAP for this year. Thank you.
Very good. All right, with that, if there are no other questions at this time, I'll move on to presentation number 2, which is a resolution. And Councilor, do you have to read that in the record for us?
I will if you'd
Please.
like me to. This is a resolution regarding the Saltwater Canal Study Phase 1, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, approving a contract with Taylor Engineering, Inc. for Phase 1 of the Saltwater Canal Study, authorizing the city manager or designee to execute necessary documents, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for implementing actions, and providing for an effective date.
Good morning.
Good morning, and there's a presentation I'm sure you'd like to share with us.
Yes.
There we go.
Mr. Johnson actually kind of stole the thunder of the introduction, so this actually goes back quite a bit for me. This was a question that was asked last year sometime, and finally taking the steps to move forward. As she said, this was part of the 2023 strategic action plan to develop a plan to maintain the saltwater canals. It was adopted in May of 22 and budgeted in the 2023 CIP. So we went out for an RFQ. We got 3 proposals. Taylor Engineering was selected, and the representatives are here today if anybody has any questions. Kickoff meeting was in April to negotiate scope and fee. We received that proposal in May. Taylor came up with a 4-prong approach to the overall project. What we're here to talk about today is the Phase 1, which is the initial assessment, right? You can't put together a program until you decide what, or until you determine what is there. Once that is determined, it would go into Phase 2, which is design and permitting. Once we know the scale and the scope, we can do design and what we would need for permitting. Then once that phase is done, we can move into construction and actually have the work done. And then once we are at a base level, now we can talk about an ongoing, establishing an ongoing maintenance program. Excuse me. So for phase one, it starts with permitting and design review. These were constructed back in the early days of constructing Palm Coast, so the 70s and 80s. So we have to go back to find out what the design criteria was, right? And find out what permits are out there and what other information is actually available. Then we have to determine permit requirements, because there's a difference between maintenance and additional dredging, right? If we just do maintenance, permitting requirements aren't as strict. If we start talking about doing additional to what the design is, then there's more to it, more permitting requirements, more information needs to be done. And then the meat of the whole phase one is the data collection, determining what's out there. So they're going to conduct a bathymetric survey to see what's actually existing today, a cursory evaluation of the seawalls, and preliminary sampling of the dredge material. And this is important because you have to determine what we dig out of there determines how we stockpile it, where we dispose of it, or even if we can repurpose it. Once the bathymetric survey is done, they can establish priority areas for dredging based on those conditions, and then start looking into access costs and other factors. And develop a concept, including phasing and estimated construction costs and the priority areas. And then one of the bigger issues is potential disposal sites. Once you dig it out, what do you do with it? So depending on how much we need will depend on how much disposal site we need. And then, of course, dredging, as you know from other projects that we've had, can be a very expensive process. So trying to identify potential funding sources. And at the end, the deliverables will be a design schedule, how long it will actually take to do the design work, a final report on their findings, and of course, one last presentation to council to go over what those findings were and potentially what the next steps are. And that's it. Any questions?
I guess my question first is, you chose a design consultant, and I guess I would like to know if the design consultant used a prior study or experience as some form of a template to design this survey that you're describing today.
I'll let them address that.
Good morning. Terrence Cake, and this is Kenneth Gregg with Taylor Engineering. So your question is, did we use a previous example?
Yeah, did you rely on previous experience, and where and what was it to develop the outline for the survey that was just described?
So we've been, the company as a whole has been doing dredging since its inception in 1983. We've done a similar project over at Longboat Key for the canal system that they have over there. We've been the engineers for the Florida Inland Navigation District for 35 years or so, and developed long-range dredge material management plans for each of the 12 counties on the Atlantic coastline. So we have lots and lots of experience doing this. We work for everything from small projects, targeted dredging, not dissimilar from what we're talking about for Palm Coast, up to big, port level, federal navigation channel type work as well. So.
And the real basis for my question is there a place, Longboat Key perhaps, that I can look to as an experience similar to what we might consider?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Others, or is that the best one?
I'm sorry?
Are there others, or is that the best one? Anything on the East Coast?
That's probably the best.
Best one. Okay. Very good.
Could you just introduce yourselves for the record?
Yeah, my name's Terrence Cake, last name C-A-K-E.
Ken Craig, both with Taylor Engineering. Terry's going to be the project manager. I'm principal in charge.
Thank you.
City Council, questions? This is a good time for it.
I'm glad to see you guys here. I started pushing for this over a year and a half ago, and I'm looking forward to see what you come up with. I know the mayor would like to get an aircraft carrier down one of our canals, but I don't think that's going to happen.
At least a cruise ship. At least a cruise ship.
But I do have a couple of little questions. Part of what you're going to be doing, are you going to be also looking into our future with these canals? Do we occasionally do dredging? Do we consider putting in a permanent system of our own? Is that part of your study?
That would, the way we have it laid out now, that is the last step of the study. Work out a plan that's more proactive than reactive to how often to get out there and do surveys and do a condition assessment of the canals, and how often to do maintenance dredging, identify hotspots that need to be dredged more often, and other areas that don't need dredged as often.
Great, because I just don't want to see us in this situation 20 years from now again. So that's all I have. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yes, we're doing the same thing with Long Goat Key for the same reason.
Thank you.
I do have a couple questions. Thank you both for being here, and thank you, Don, for the presentation. Are you going to be looking at, it's my understanding we did a previous assessment of the canals maybe 10 or so years ago. Will you all be looking at that and comparing it to the assessment you'll be doing to see at what rate our canals are doing whatever it is they're doing?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we do have a copy of that survey. 2005, I believe, is the date that's on that one. And there's an odd datum on that that makes it a little bit hard to compare it to current conditions. But we got the original files, and we do intend to go back and look at that and see if we can correct that datum and use that as an assessment to determine, as you mentioned, how many feet per year, inches per year the sediments are creating in the canals.
And then just for the benefit of our residents, and I don't expect you to go into any grave detail, but what exactly will the bathymetric survey tell us, and what is the assessment of the seawalls also supposed to tell us?
So the seawall assessment is just a visual look to see if there's any place where a seawall is either missing, has it never been installed, or has been removed, or is in disrepair, where sediment may be eroding and getting from the land into the canal, contributing to the dredging problem. And the bathymetric survey is essentially a topographic survey like you'd see on a map underwater. It'll be a three-dimensional model of the surface beneath the water line. So that'll show us where the high points are and where the low points are, the depth within all 26 miles of the canal system.
And then my last question is for funding. What will you all consider or analyze in order to help us figure out where our funding sources will be for this?
I believe FIND is Florida Inland Navigation District has a program to help small communities with navigation projects, which this would fit. Part of our exercise is to go forth and see if there's any other options along those lines that might help with funding for the town.
So you all will look into further grants and things of that nature to see how we can help to fund this project?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Councilperson Hyder?
Yes, I have no questions at this time, but I'd like to thank you for the presentation. Thank you for your explanation, and as this project progresses, I'm sure that I will have questions, and I do know that there are many residents that are concerned about the dredging of the saltwater canals. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Very good. Gentlemen, I think, again, it's early on. When can we expect a first draft of their report, or the first?
The timeline on the initial assessment was 6 to 7 months based on the notice to proceed.
Okay, so mid-year, give or take. Very good. Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions at this time? Gentlemen, thank you very much for the presentation. We look forward to hearing from you at your earliest opportunities.
Thank you. We look forward to working with you.
Very good. Thank you for the presentation. Our next item is a presentation on neighborhood roadway safety, I believe an update. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Give me a moment to set up here. This presentation will provide City Council with an overview on safety initiatives that are occurring on residential roadways in the city of Palm Coast. Give an outline of what we're going to be talking about. We'll cover 3 areas today: the city roadway system, Palm Coast residential safety practices, and general topic of traffic calming. For simplicity, Palm Coast residential network can be broken into 2 categories: residential roadways and arterial roadways. Residential roadways are characterized by the presence of driveways to single-family homes connecting onto the roadway. Arterial roadways typically do not have residential driveways and are designed to carry large volumes of traffic at high speeds over long distances. What I want to introduce to you is traffic safety as a process. When we get a report of a traffic issue, we go out and investigate the site, we evaluate those results, and we respond with an appropriate solution if a solution is warranted. On an average, the city receives 10 to 15 resident concerns about traffic or roadway safety. They tell us where the problems may be occurring and where to consider making improvement. We highly value these reports because without these reports from our residents, we couldn't possibly know where the problems might be. So one traffic manager in our office spends about 25% of his work week evaluating and replying to these traffic issues. I want to talk through some safety initiatives that have been implemented in Palm Coast. The city recently had hired a consultant to evaluate what could be done to accommodate pedestrians on residential roads that do not currently have sidewalk. The study concluded that the concept of retrofitting sidewalks has 2 major roadblocks. The cost of roadway reconstruction would be high. The sidewalk retrofit would require every property owner to agree to a construction easement. That easement would cover both modifying their driveway, deconstructing it and rebuilding it, and it would involve taking the existing front yard of people's properties and changing the slope so that it meets the new slope for where the swale had been relocated. So those easements would be necessary from each and every property owner in order to complete a sidewalk segment. One of the examples of traffic safety initiative that the city has is residential lighting for intersections. One of the initial items was to work with school districts and add lighting to all intersections that serve as bus stops for our school children. The city has an application process online where a resident can go to the city website. I have the site here, specifically to the engineering page. And there is an application there where if a resident sees in their neighborhood a location, an intersection of 2 streets that currently is not lighted, they can apply for that residential light. Our process then is that someone from the city will go out, investigate the site, determine if it indeed meets the criteria for putting in a residential light, and if it does, the city will install and maintain that light at city expense. For residential roadways and all roadways in the city of Palm Coast, the city puts up signs and striping that are consistent with what's required by the National Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Whether a resident posts a residential roadway speeding report to the city or to the Flagler County Sheriff's Office, that speeding report comes to the traffic engineering section. When the city receives a report that is speeding, how do we respond? In the city of Palm Coast in general, residential roads are posted at 30 miles per hour. This speed posting conforms to the state of Florida regulation that residential roadways shall be posted at 30 miles per hour. So we respond by sending out one of our traffic safety technicians. They'll place a traffic radar device on that roadway, and that device will then record both the speed of the vehicles and the number of vehicles that pass by that sensor for the entire time the sensor's out there. When we get that data back, we then analyze it by creating a graph out of the data. And from that graph, we find a number of different data points. One is, what is the posted speed of the roadway compared to the drivers on the road? This graph you can see here is the number of vehicles that were traveling at a specific speed. And then to the left of the posted speed, you can see the number of drivers that were less than the posted speed. To the right, you can see the number of the drivers that were going faster than the posted speed. And then we can calculate a value of what was the average speed of those drivers on the roadway. And then we get a value of what is the 85th percentile speed of the drivers on the roadway. So that 85th percentile speed is just a mathematical definition. 15% of the drivers are going faster than this speed value, and 85% of those drivers are going slower than this speed value. And it is a standard reference point where in roadway design is what is the actual characteristic speed of this roadway is typically referenced as the 85th percentile speed. So in measuring whether this is a speeding condition that there's some opportunity to address, or whether this is a normal operation of the road, values that I'm looking for is the average speed of the drivers within 3 miles per hour of the speed limit, in that case plus or minus 10%? Is the 85th percentile speed within 7 miles per hour of the posted speed limit? If both of those values are true, this is the normal performance that you could expect on a roadway for that posted speed limit. So after we've done our investigation of the roadway, we will have determined whether or not that speed profile is within a normal range or whether it is outside of a normal range. We'll also have looked at the crash history on that roadway. Is the crash history 0, which is what we'd definitely like to see, or is it a low condition? If both of those are true, that the roadway is operating at a normal profile for speed and the crashes are low, at that point we've determined that there's nothing that we have an opportunity to improve at this time on the roadway. We do follow up. We send that data to the Flagler County Sheriff's Office. Every time we've done one of these studies, we send that data to the Flagler County Sheriff's Office. Our team will have looked through that data to find patterns. If there's a pattern where there's a group of speeding vehicles, high-speed vehicles during a certain time frame, we will point that out when we send that to the Flagler County Sheriff's Office, and they can use that data for their own enforcement purposes. We also then do follow-up by informing the resident of the outcome of that study. Traffic calming is a large general topic, and the issue of changing the roadway to change the driver's speed profile is a subset of traffic calming. So the traffic calming definition that I put up there is from the ITE organization, which is the Institution of Transportation Engineers, which is the engineering society that guides traffic engineering information. So what they say is that traffic calming is the combination of mainly physical measures that reduce negative effects of motor vehicle use, alter driver behavior, and improve conditions for non-motorized street users. In gray, I've posted reference documents that where I sourced much of my material that I'm going to present to you here, so that if you want to see where this information came from. In the city of Palm Coast, we have already some traffic calming features on our residential roadway, and naturally by the way the city has designed the roadway. Landscape medians in a residential area, as is shown here, is one example. Another example would be that if you look at a satellite photo of the city, you will see that many of the residential roadways are loops. They loop back often to the same major roadway that they came back from. That creates an isolated neighborhood that there's no advantage for a driver to go into that neighborhood in order to get somewhere else. Our roadways also commonly are not perfectly straight. They have bends and curves in them. Those bends and curves are part of a traffic calming concept of making the driver adjust their vehicle so as to be constantly aware of and controlling their speed. When a resident reports a speeding issue on their roadway, often they will come to us also with a solution that they think ought to be employed on their roadway. One of the solutions that comes up often is putting up an active speed display sign. City of Palm Coast currently does have active speed display signs at two locations. One's at Florida Park Drive and another is at Casper Drive in the city. So an active speed display sign is not technically a traffic calming device because it doesn't change the physical aspects of the road. However, it does have some opportunity for some speed reduction potential. Studies have shown that speed reduction is highest when these devices are first installed. Then as drivers get used to them over time, they start ignoring them because they're just part of the landscape now. So a lot of agencies have the practice that they don't install permanent signs, but rather they have mobile devices that they move around and leave in place for anywhere from 3 to 4 days to a couple weeks, and then move them to another location so that they're getting more impact out of the devices when they use them. So the unintended consequences, as we talked about here, were more devices become less effective and they lose their impact over time. Another option to change the characteristic of the roadway to reduce speed that drivers often come to us with is put in speed bumps on the roadway. In the category of speed bump, there are multiple segments in that category, and most common versions of that are speed bumps, speed humps, and speed tables. Here, a speed bump is a height of 2 to 4 inches, and it's a width of 12 to 24 inches. Speed humps are a device that's a width of 12 to 14 feet and a height of 3 to 4 inches. Speed tables are essentially a speed hump with a flat surface in between, and that flat surface is that table area, typically 10 to 20 feet long. So studies have shown that the speed bumps, humps, and tables all are point speed reduction devices. So the drivers will tend to slow down within 200 feet of the speed bump. They'll start slowing down. After they get beyond that speed bump by 100 to 300 feet, those drivers have reached their normal driving speed. So if we're going to install speed bumps on the roadway, and the intention is to maintain speed and the intention is to maintain speed at a much lower rate throughout the corridor, the recommended practice is to maintain them, at a spacing of about 300 feet. And then you'd put in multiple speed tables. When it comes to speed bumps, speed humps, speed tables, or other traffic calming devices, the most loud voice often against putting in such devices is the emergency response team in your community, because The emergency response vehicles are large, and they take much more impact from these speed hump speed tables than a standard vehicle does, and those vehicles cannot avoid, those vehicles, like all vehicles, when you put out a speed bump type device, cannot avoid them, and they delay those vehicles from their emergency response. Emergency response time is a key indicator for our emergency vehicles as to what their performance is in serving the community. And so it's a very high concern for our emergency vehicles to have to be impacting the speed bump on their path to a rescue mission. So the benefit of a speed bump or speed hump speed table is a point speed reduction. However, that point speed reduction occurs with all drivers, not just the speeders on the roadway. Some agencies have rules for installing speed bumps and similar devices that includes a signed petition of 60% or more of the residents in favor of the installation. Some agencies require the neighborhood to pay the cost of the installation and the cost of the removal of the devices. So in summary, city staff is constantly focused on traffic safety as a primary goal. It is in our DNA. We study every report. If the issue reported is within a normal range, we take no action on the roadway. If the issue is outside of normal, the city team will evaluate all possible solutions to see what can be done that fits the issue. So that's the end of my presentation. Are there any questions for me?
Just one question for me real quick. The slide, the graphic, the graph slide, is that just an example, or is that actual data from our city?
Oh, I'm going to go back to that slide that you're referring to. That data is, I've taken the units off of the data, but that is a graph of the traffic that is occurring on Cimarron Drive.
This particular slide is for Cimarron, and I assume that then there are graphs for the other dozen or so roads that we had identified in previous council meetings as potentially problematic.
When we do traffic, we do these traffic speeding counts based on input that we get from a resident concern. So we're not doing them on a individual basis, on a uniform basis throughout the city, but only based on concern requests.
So I would just ask city manager, when it's appropriate, we do have a listing of, I can't remember if it was a dozen or so roadways that were chosen for presentation last year. I'd just like to know what was the basis that they were chosen. So I don't need to know that right now, but I'd like to know it. And help me interpret this graph. This graph tells me the blue graphic line shows that your data is under or beneath the limits that have been set by either the city or DOT or whomever?
Okay, I'm going to go through and explain the graph for you.
Okay, thank you.
The blue line that represents that hump formation is what's referred to in statistics as a normal bell curve. The data that's shown there is the vehicles have been binned, sorry, that's a technical term, but basically assigned a range. Mm-hmm. So let's say with the 30-mile-an-hour speed, the range is going to be a vehicle that's in the range of 29.5 to 30 miles per hour is going to be one vertical point. So all of the vehicles that are in that specific narrow range of 29.5 to 30 are going to be in one column. This is represented as a line chart, but you could reformat as individual columns. However, visually that gets a little bit confusing. So
it's redundant. There's two things happening there. That's what I wanted to be sure of. So that blue vertical line is telling me that that we have a speeding problem.
That blue vertical line is telling you how many vehicles
Exceeded the speed limit.
We're at this speed. So to the right of the green line, for the blue line on this chart is representing the speed limit. So the vehicles that are, the area under the blue curve to the right are the number of the vehicles that were above the speed limit on that roadway. Now, where the lines fall on this particular graph, I was using this graph as a conceptual rather than a specific, so I was not matching up to the data perfectly.
But we do have the data available so that if I want to know in each of those various streets that we identified previously, you know, either, I'm trying to define the magnitude of the speeding problem, especially with regard to a communication to the sheriff's office.
What I would like to propose is if you're looking for data on those specific roads, it is common practice for us, our team, to do these speeding reports. We can sample them on a current basis.
But we're sharing that with the sheriff already.
The sheriff gets the results of every one of our speed surveys, yes.
Okay. So I would ask city manager, just another summary so I could be more clear in terms of, I need to understand the magnitude of the speeding issue in particular. I mean, there are other issues, of course. I'm just going to pick that one out so I understand it better. Questions?
As we discussed yesterday in our private meeting concerning this, I think we'll all agree, we've seen an increase in just bad driving, not just in Palm Coast, but all across the country. All you got to do is go out to I-95. You can really see a good example of it. So one of the things that we discussed, and I'd like to just let the rest of staff hear this, is the possibility of working with our sheriff's office, with Flagler County, with our media, and coming up with more of a public awareness, maybe a driving safety month of some degree, where we really make a heavy push on getting people to pay a little more attention behind the wheel. And maybe we combine that with a little bit more traffic enforcement by our sheriff's department and the additional deputy sheriffs that we have provided. I mean, we've all seen people run red lights. We've all seen people speed up when the light turns yellow. Nobody stops on red anymore when they make a right-hand turn. And it's just gotten worse. And I think that we really need to make a major push on the community, and again, enhanced with police enforcement, to send that message that you got to slow down, folks. You got to follow the law. So it's just something I wanted to throw out there to staff. I've thrown it out to our city manager, something we should keep in the back of our mind, because it's just gotten bad. And you do amazing work with all these things, but you know, as we discussed, you can find a street where you got people speeding, but you can't park a vehicle out there, police vehicle out there 24 hours to catch one or two people. So it's tough to deal with these things, and I appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, and I wholeheartedly agree with that approach. I think that we need to get the public involved. I did have a few questions about the actual numbers, and I also would like the same reports that Mayor Alpin will be getting with regards to what you all have done for this surveying. More specifically, with regards to slide 100, where, or I guess not slide 100, it's page 100 in the packet, but your slide regarding traffic calming on the speed bumps, humps, and tables.
Yes.
It says unintended consequences. Where is and I don't disagree, I'm not saying that I disagree with some of the unintended consequences, but do you all have any actual data, or have you done any resident surveys on kind of what the cost benefit of these speed humps and tables is versus these unintended consequences? Or is this based on just literature that you've read?
So at the bottom of this slide, you'll see that I have a list of the Iowa DOT study. That was in my report at the beginning. I showed you that gray area. Mm-hmm. One of the documents that I was referencing is a study from the Iowa DOT on the impacts of temporary speed bumps in small cities. And from that, this summary is taken from that document.
Okay, so we haven't actually engaged our residents on this research in any way, have we?
No, I haven't engaged our residents. What I was looking for is one of the things that happens in the world of traffic calming is there are people out there who are trying to sell you these products. The majority of the data that is out there is from the people who are trying to sell you these products, and you have to wonder whether that's correct or not. So what I was looking for in my record search was documents put out by third-party agencies, and this one by the Iowa DOT was a very, very extensive and well-done document that covered a wide range of the topic. So that's one of the reasons I put it in here for the reference, because from a reference standpoint, it gives a very even-handed discussion of the topic, both the positives and the negatives of the topic.
And it's my understanding that you are somewhat handcuffed in what we can do, or I say you, but I mean we as a city, as far as the speed limits, signage, things like that. But I don't want our residents to be discouraged, because from the presentation, it seems like, oh, we're kind of doing everything that we can. There's not really too much more that we can do, but I, like Councilman Danko, had an individual meeting with you and we talked about some alternatives. So I do just want to note that we are still looking at options to make some of our residential streets that have become a concern, like Cimarron, safer, and still exploring some of those options. So this doesn't mean that the door has been shut on that, but this is, in my mind, kind of a report as to where we are right now. Is that accurate?
That's very correct. The door is never shut. And that's one of the value of getting the reports from residents. If it's the 15th call, and I'm being exaggerating there, about the same sort of problem at a location, and we've studied it 14 times, obviously there's a problem there that we're not finding. So these reports don't get forgotten, but we've studied it. If it becomes a problem again, it becomes another data point on the path. The issue's never closed. It's a matter of finding a solution that fits, but at the same time, not an overreaction to a moment.
Okay, thank you.
So,
If I might just add, I know in the past, you and I have gone out and looked at situations that we've got complaints from residents and looked at finding solutions, and I would suggest if you get a call from anyone and you want to engage him, you're very accessible and willing to go out and do those things without doubt.
I'm very eager to meet with the residents to see what their problems are, because I work at my desk about 90% of my work week. I can't know where the problems are unless somebody says I've got a problem. And if somebody says I've got a problem, I want that resident potentially to show me what the problem is, because I don't know what their point of reference is, and I don't know what they experience on a daily basis. And in that investigation, I definitely want to know what the perspective of the individual is, so I can understand exactly what they are looking at.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much.
and just a comment to Councilperson Pontieri's about the door being closed. So as city council, the doorknob is in our hand. So it would be up to this city council to provide direction on ways to make those roads more tolerable for the residents. So I agree, but for sure, this is not the end of the discussion by any means, and that would be, under our control to continue to follow up. I love the idea of the initiatives. Very well said.
Again, thank you for your presentation. Excuse me. I do feel that these traffic calming devices are very helpful as long as they're placed strategically in the neighborhoods, and I drive through Palm Coast a lot. But my main concern would be for our first responders and our emergency services vehicles, because I know that a matter of seconds could sometimes mean a matter of life and death. So if we have these speed bumps in different areas, how much effect would that have on our first responders or emergency services vehicles where those time elements are concerned? in a matter of seconds.
For each individual speed bump, according to the slide that I showed you earlier, the delay is in the neighborhood of 9 seconds, was what was calculated.
did see
based on
that.
on those studies. I don't have direct information as to what kind of vehicle they were traveling over when they did the study, because that could greatly affect what the answer is. So if our fire chief, I'm sure if it became an issue where that was something we'd go down, we would definitely want to have practice studies with their equipment to get an idea for our equipment, what would that impact truly be. But based on the data that I have right now, I'll tell you that is 9 seconds is approximately what the industry is telling me is going to be the delay.
Another question, do you think that any way that sometimes when we have these speed bumps or humps or tables, that they could potentially be a cause for accident? Because I know when we had the traffic lights, you found that, and it even happened to me one time, so it's a personal experience. I found that sometimes with the cameras, you couldn't see the traffic light. If there was I had a tractor trailer in front of me, and I could not see the traffic light. So therefore, I speeded up, but I got caught by that traffic light, by the camera. So do you think that the speed bumps could potentially cause any incidents or traffic accidents because of something like that?
We have all sorts of incidents that are unusual circumstances that can cause, that an accident was caused by this or that or the other thing. But certainly, it's quite feasible to predict that you've put a bump in the roadway and for whatever reason the circumstances collide, that an accident or a crash occurs. Essentially, it wouldn't have occurred had this unusual feature in the roadway not been there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you again for the presentation and our meeting. One additional unintended consequence that I didn't see on our slide was the pollution impacts of slowing a vehicle down and then accelerating a vehicle from a standpoint. We have talked about it in the past, and I feel like Steve Carr should be here. This is like his wheelhouse. But essentially, a car produces 85% of emissions achieving its speed that it's trying to maintain. So when you slow a car down, you have to reaccelerate. You're creating a lot of localized pollution, which isn't the biggest of deals, but it is for people who are living near these speed bumps. But I think this is a completely valid set of unintended consequences, and it really comes down to how I think if we go down a route of trying to implement something like this, how you poll the neighborhoods. The 60% threshold, the supermajority of people who would have to approve these type of things. I think the unspoken minority would be, or I should say the loud minority would be in favor of this type of solution, but when you actually drill down into the individual residents who would be impacted by these speed tables in front of their homes, I'm curious as to historically what have been some of the results, but I think this is a great holistic approach, and I appreciate not only the data, but also your continued efforts to make sure Palm Coast has the safest roads possible.
Thank you. Just Chief Berryhill, I saw you chomping at the bit, and for Councilperson Hyder's, I can't resist having you come up and help us follow up with this.
Yes, sir, Mayor and Councilperson Hyder, you're exactly right. Everything that calms traffic calms a fire truck and calms a police car and an ambulance. And fire trucks and ambulances are big, and so we have to take longer times to slow down as we approach these types of devices. And then it takes us longer to accelerate. They're not necessarily designed to come off the line like some people's vehicles are. And so everything about the unintended consequences, the road noise will be even more extreme. We operate at odd hours of the night because that's when we go when the emergency comes. We do sometimes have to accelerate hard off of that to try and make sure that we're meeting our response times, getting there fast. Time is definitely the business we're in. And so there is a double-edged sword, right? We obviously want the roads to be as safe as possible. And I think Mr. Grunwald's presentation said that we're looking at what is our outcomes, like how many injuries are we having, how many crashes are we having in these areas. And we're kind of trying to let that be a guide as to what our great next step is. So, but absolutely, anything that calms traffic increases our response time.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
And the last comment I have, City Manager, since I represent our liaison to the Transportation Planning Organization, so the TPO has significant resources that can be requested and asked for really in the short term to educate the public and to help us with some of what's being discussed today. So I would ask you to be proactive and get us together with the TPO to make sure that we have asked for and are receiving all of the resources that we can possibly get from that organization.
Absolutely, Mayor, and I am very appreciative of the detailed discussion today. That really helps our staff in executing what we do from our operations standpoint. And I know collectively here in the county, we work together on many different initiatives. And just to share, our relationship with the sheriff is very strong, and we have a great opportunity to continue to grow these initiatives, not only from awareness with the TPO, but also some of the input I heard today about communications.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So we heard that loud and clear, and the discussions that you have here really help us in executing our operations.
Great. Thank you. Yes, please.
I have one more comment. I want to assure our residents that I am going to be a steward for looking for alternatives that don't have some of these unintended consequences. I agree with regards to response times. We want to find that happy medium. I look forward to working with you and the department on some alternatives that we can reach, because what I don't want is for us to be sitting here 6 months from now talking about a child that was hit by a car. What I don't want is for us acting retroactively rather than proactively. And I think that there are solutions that we can come up with that can, no pun intended, that can calm these unintended consequences. So I look forward to working with you guys on that. I am keeping in mind all of these other things that we're talking about, but I just don't want us to be put in a situation where we are regretting not being proactive in this manner.
Thank you, Councilperson. Any final comments? Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Next item on the presentation agenda is number 4, a resolution. And Council, if you would read that in for me.
Yes. This is a resolution regarding the Third Amendment to the Ralph Carter Park Communications Site Lease Agreement, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, approving the Third Amendment to the Communications Site Lease Agreement with Metro PCS Florida, Inc. at Ralph Carter Park, authorizing the city manager or designee to execute necessary documents, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for implementing actions, and providing for an effective date.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Good morning.
Doug Akins, IT Director, here to present this amendment to the site lease for you. And I wanted to just give you a frame of reference of where this cell tower is at. It is located at the back of Ralph Carter Park, right off of Rimfire Drive. This tower was constructed in 2008, and currently T-Mobile is the sole provider on this tower. You'll see Metro PCS listed throughout the agreement. T-Mobile bought them out, I think, in 2012, and also recently acquired Sprint in 2020. But again, this agreement was entered into 2008. It was a 30-year agreement. There was an initial 5-year term with 5-year renewals after that. They're looking to do some upgrades on the tower. They want to upgrade their equipment, but all the upgrades are happening in the existing leased space. So they're not going to expand their lease, they're not expanding what they're consuming, but they are upgrading the equipment. So in order to do so, we have to update the exhibits inside of the lease. So that's the reason for this amendment, is updating the exhibits that are in the lease as to the equipment and placement of the equipment inside of the lease space. While we are updating the lease, we took the opportunity to change some of the language as far as updating references to 2 parties that are no longer part of the lease, Cityscape and Diamond. And also there is a part added that adds provision for T-Mobile providing written notice to the city if there's any changes, and also allowing for us to request a video inspection of changes up to $2,000 at their expense if we so request. So that's the nuts and bolts of the amendment, if you have any questions on it.
So upgrade the equipment. Does that mean service will improve, or there will be improvements?
That's the reason for the upgrade, is to improve service to the area for their customers, correct?
And does the service area expand, or is the productivity or efficiency within the existing service improve?
I'm not sure if it expands it. I know they're putting up new antennas, which should accommodate for the customers receiving better service, but it's possible it could expand it, but I don't know that for sure.
No questions.
Can you hear me now?
We're good? When will this take place?
They're looking to move as soon as possible. So once this is approved, they'll get to work.
Okay, so give me a month, 2 months from now?
Hopefully, yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, you mean when will the upgrades occur?
Yes.
Or,
What
well,
I'm looking for, when are their boots going to be on the ground so that the community will be aware of what's happening? Because I'm sure we're going to get the question, what are they doing?
Well, I believe they already have the drawings submitted and the permit in place.
Okay.
So once this is approved next week, they'll get to work.
So relatively soon, in case we get input from the community.
This is
Good,
correct.
thank you. Okay, thank you. Next item, number 5, a resolution. Counselor?
yes, this is a resolution pertaining to the East Section West, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, approving a work order increase for additional costs related to the East Section West Drainage Rehabilitation Project, authorizing the city manager or designee to execute said grant application, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for implementing actions, and providing for an effective date.
Good morning. And I don't come here very often, so for those who don't know me, I'm Carmelo from Stormwater Engineer. And I wanted to just start talking about this project. This is all part of a much larger project, right, which has already begun 4 or 5 years ago, from its conceptual design, et cetera. So the East Section West is kind of one of the later stages of it to complete it. The East Section dredging project consisted of dredging of the Eisenhower and East Hampton canals. That portion was completed about 7 months ago. It also included some other drainage improvement project parts of it, such as lining some pipes, increasing some pipe conveyance, replacing some of them. The next step after that, it's more of an in-house, right? So the dredging portion of it occurred through State Revolving Fund, and it was awarded to a contractor that did the major heavy lifting of that project. These other steps that are coming forward are more in-house stuff that we have our maintenance guys that can do it. We have the equipment. So it's usually a lot more economical to do it that way. So we've done a lot of swale and ditch regrading, vegetation removal, pipe installations along not just the Early and Evans ditch, but other ditches throughout the East Section that tied into these canals, right? The particular reason why I'm here now to, approve this work order to extend beyond the 50. Initially, it was in the 40s, and it was, I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with utility work, right? But part of the project included lowering storm pipes to be able to create that better conveyance from the upstream, so we lessened the floods in upstream roads. Well, you can't do that if you have a utility line there, right? There's going to be a conflict, so we need to directional drill underneath that so we don't have any loss of service to the residents in the area. So that's what this work order is for. It's just directional drilling. We're dropping the utility mains lower so that we can accommodate the new storm pipe. So that'll be this, I don't want to call it a phase, but what this work order is for directional drilling. Then we'll have to come back with another utility contractor to reconnect those services to the new directional drill line, and then the city will come back, probably in-house, and finalize with the storm pipes. That's what the expected future cost, which I don't have right now. I still have to go work through the contractors and the bidding process to get those there. These are some pictures of some of the events. These particular ones are the ditch that occurred between Early and Evans. It was significant, and that was all done by in-house. Even those pipes that we ordered there were all done in-house construction. It's a little snippet there of some of the designs for the pipe crossings that are to happen. And you can see on this next one here what the already approved PO amount is, and the requested increase amount. And by the way, the requested increase is, I met the contractor on site, and from what we had on the drawings versus what's in the field, it just made sense, right? We have existing driveways. Sometimes we needed to move the air release valves a little further to make it work with what's really happening there. You don't want to put it right adjacent to someone's driveway, which would be a conflict. So we had to extend some of the pipes out, some of the runs to make it work. And that is the end of that. If you guys have any questions.
So just a question, maybe I'll direct it to City Manager. These kind of projects always impact residents either just, out of curiosity or directly. Is there, will there be some PR initiative to keep the local residents informed of progress or make them aware of what's happening?
Yes, sir. And in fact, we're very proud of a project dashboard that we have, that our residents can actually go to a publicly faced viewing map that you can see exactly what's happening and the progress and who the project manager is, in this case, Carmelo, and actually just reach out directly to us to get the results of the efforts. But yes, we do showcase our projects because we're very proud of the positive impact after, unfortunately, some of the disruption in the neighborhood and the results that are delivered through the project.
Right, because we have a history in the local area, so if we can go above and beyond, and perhaps when I go out and share with the mayor a little bit, we can keep those folks up to date, so we, are better at communicating our progress. I think that'd be great. Good, thank you.
Understood. Thank you, Mayor.
Questions or comments on the project?
I have none.
I have a couple questions. The increased cost is about 25% of what was improved, and that's a large part of the contract amount. Was this something that wasn't foreseeable, this change?
No, it was just based on field conditions, right? So the initial drawings and plans were done by DRMP, was our consultant engineer who did these plans. Not a lot of times, but sometimes when you go out on the field, it's different than what you were seeing on paper. So the main thing was that we had to extend a couple of the lines much further down to place the air release valve, which is probably like a 4x6 box, to put it in front of an adjacent, a vacant lot, rather than put it immediately adjacent to a driveway. Because then you're asking about potential more damage, right? If you damage the driveway, then we got to pay more money to replace that. So it's hard for the designers to kind of foresee some of that when they're just working in their office. It just happened this way. And it's also based on a continuing services contract, right? So the prices are kind of established. And it doesn't vary, right? We have a unit cost. We just extended X amount of linear feet of pipe times whatever it's the already approved rate for that,
So I know that $11,000 isn't a lot of money in the scheme of our entire budget, but if we were to increase projects like this by 25% in the aggregate, they would start to add up, and it makes it very hard on our staff to then have a balanced budget. So is there something that we can do in the future when we're getting these estimates, maybe perhaps go to the site or use drones or video of some sort so that they can actually see what they're working with, rather than just working from their office and from paper, so to speak, so that we can actually have a better handle on what these will cost at the end, rather than making changes and adding monies to our budget as we go?
Yeah, that's certainly possible, something we can do. And I'll tell you, I follow up with some of these things, and a lot of times it's also less, right? So I'll follow up, and then we make that change order where we deduct the amount. So it's not always an increase. Sometimes there's a deduction. But you have to make sure you follow up. If they didn't install, or it wasn't needed to install as much, then we make those change orders as well.
And I do see that this is part of a larger contract and a larger project, so maybe in order to avoid this and this specific project, can we, rather than approving things based on paper drawings, and I know that's a very lax term for what you all do, I don't mean to impugn or belittle, is there a way that we can get people out at the site before we approve the next stages of these projects?
There's a way.
Or even drones, whatever we can do, because, like I said, a 25% increase in the current contract that's a pretty good chunk of money.
Yeah, and I get that. There probably is a way. When you're meeting with contractors, it probably took me 2 months just to get them to go out there. Everybody's really busy, So it's, sometimes when you get them there, you just have to pull the trigger and do it, because you don't know if you're gonna be able to get them back for another 3 weeks to go out there. But I do get what you're saying. There probably is some stuff that we can do. And maybe I could have just held off from creating the initial PO and just done this one after we have met. But, you know, we try to move the things a little further sometimes just to expedite it. Like I said, this project's been going since 4 or 5 years. We're also anxious to get it done, you know, and finalize the improvements. But I definitely understand what you're saying, yes.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I would just ask that maybe we explore some of those options for future projects so that we don't have surprises like this.
Certainly, yes.
Thank you.
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
I don't have any questions. I would just respond. The 25% marker on this one's a little bit deceiving because it's a smaller project, and it's that the way that you explained it is that the additional materials basically are at cost, whatever we would determine for wherever it needs to go. So the 25% factor is really, the way I look at it, is an additional $11,000 plus or minus on, you know, the actual implementation of it. But I concur with your statements, Councilwoman, that we should be more diligent about making sure that things are the way they are before we actually get out there. But again, the 25% number is a little bit misleading in this one because it's a smaller project. If it was 25% of $1 million culvert, they'd be off by a mile. But this one is not too bad, so I appreciate it.
So, Carmelo, you owe us a 25% reduction, not an increase, in a bigger project down the road, so keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's how it works. I like
The only cautionary note is, and I would favor certainly exploring the good comments that were made, but remember also, there will be a cost to doing that. So speaking as an engineer, standing on top of the ground is until you get those shovels in, I think Florida Park Drive is really a good example. Until you dug it up, you really had no idea what the other issues were. There's just no way to know it. And we can always improve, raise the bar, and there is technology that I think can be helpful. But there are a number of competing factors involved with all of this, and we will trust it to you to make sure that we're doing our very, very best and getting, you know, your best projections in place so that, you know, we're approving numbers that we can depend on down the road, and I know your staff does a really good job, so thank you for that. Very good.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll go to item number 6, another resolution. Counselor, if you would bring that in for us, please.
Yes, this is a resolution amending the federal fiscal year 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plans. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, amending the federal fiscal year 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plans to reallocate $133,620.65 from federal fiscal year 2017, 2018, and 2019 funds to the housing rehabilitation activity, and reallocate $108,620.65 of funding from federal fiscal year 2020 funds to public service grants and youth activities as described in more detail in Exhibit A, authorizing the city manager or designee to execute necessary documents, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for implementing actions, and providing for an effective date.
Mr. Papa, presentation?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mayor and members of City Council. Jose Papa for the Community Development Department. This action is a request to amend our CDBG annual action plans. The annual action plan for CDBG is adopted annually by City Council, and it identifies the use of the CDBG funds for that year. As required by CDBG rules, the reallocation of funds from one activity to another requires an amendment to the annual action plan. And what we try to do with this amendment and why it's necessary is that we try to use the oldest funds available, in this case from the 2017, 18, and 19 funds, to pay for activities that have been completed. And in this case, in exchange for using those older funds, which were, in this case, identified for a different activity, we are going to instead dedicate some of the newer funds to pay for those older activities that were previously identified. And this is why I consider this to be a housekeeping amendment in nature, because we're not decreasing the amount available for in this case, public service grant activities or public service youth activities. The only decrease here would be for the administration function. We find that we have more than adequate funding to meet the administration costs. So in this case, we're just going to move that into the housing activity and allow it to be used out into the field to benefit a resident rather than to pay our administration costs, because we have adequate funds. So there's a lot here, but just looking at each column, so try to get this, here we are. Anyway, so the second column, basically identifies that that's the $25,000 that were identified in 17, 18, 19 for general planning administration, and we will move that to the housing activity. The third column there that you see, which is the public service grant funding, would be moved to housing activity. That's a total of $63,384. And again, we're talking about the 17, 18, and 19 funds. And the fourth column, that's the public service youth activities, and again, moving those to housing activities. And that's a total of $45,236.65. So this next table will just show you that of those amounts, as I mentioned previously, the general planning admin activity funds, we will not reimburse from the 2020 funds. We will just allow that to go into the housing activity. But instead, the newer funds that we have, the 2020, we will take money from the housing activity to the public service grant activities, that's shown in the third column. And the housing activity funds, again, will now, a portion of that will be rededicated to public service youth activities. Again, to just make up for, we took money from 17, 18, 19 to this activity. Now all we're going to do is take money from the 20 activity to pay for those activities. The whole purpose of this is just to make sure that we're using the oldest funds available in CDBG, so that we don't run into the issue of having we've never had this issue before, but we have 6 years to spend the funds, and we just didn't want to run into any kind of wall. And the reason this becomes necessary now is previously, in fact, before 2015, it was a first in, first out system that HUD used. You drew down. It didn't matter what it didn't matter what activity it was intended for. If it's the oldest funds, it drew down. But since 2015, they've moved to a more what they call grant system. That is, so if you tell me you're going to spend it on this, I expect you to spend it on this activity. And if you change it, you need to tell me. And that's what we're doing here. This was reviewed by the Citizens Advisory Task Force, and they recommended the City Council approve the proposed amendments. We had a public hearing with the Citizens Advisory Task Force on December 7th. As with this proposed amendment was published on our website and allowed for a 30-day public comment. We received no comments. We're here at the City Council Public Workshop, January 10th, and at your next business meeting, this will be on your agenda for formal approval. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions at this time.
I have no questions.
No question, just want to thank you and your staff for the work that you continue to do in the program.
Am I correct in saying that we are increasing the efficiency of the dollars over this period of years by flushing out the old dollars? And I understand it's a housekeeping, it's a little bit of a cash flow and accounting principle, but are we improving the expenditure of these funds to get them in the hands of the residents sooner?
We will. In fact, the reason that you know, some of the 16, 17, 18, $19 were there because we were developing that particular program at the time. And we had some delays with retaining a consultant, and COVID hit, and the focus became on using the COVID dollars rather than this. So now we're ready to move forward with this chunk.
Thank you. Councilperson Hyder?
I have no further questions, but I did have the opportunity to meet with the CDBG committee yesterday. It was a very informative meeting, and I thank you for that, and I'm looking forward to working with you more.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I have nothing. Thank you, Jose.
Mr. Papa, thank you for the presentation. And you're going to stay right there, I see. So number 7, another resolution, Counselor, if you would.
This is a resolution concerning the Affordable Housing Incentives Report, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, approving the Affordable Housing Incentives Report 2023 for inclusion into the Local Housing Assistance Plan for the State Housing Initiatives Partnership, SHIP Act. Section 420.907 Florida statutes through Section 420.9079 Florida statutes, and Rule Chapter 67-37 Florida Administrative Code, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for implementing actions, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and council members. My name is Joe Hegedus. I am the Director of Health and Human Services for Flagler County, and I'm here with Devry Paradowski, who's our Housing Program Manager at Health and Human Services. So as was mentioned, we are here today to provide an overview of the recent work of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee and some of their recommendations for incentivizing and paving the way for affordable housing development and workforce housing development in our community. So I'll start us off with a few background slides and information, and then Devry will dive into the actual incentives that we are hoping to put forth for consideration. So again, a little background on the advisory committee. It is based on state statute that requires communities have an advisory committee and review and consider aspects related to affordable housing. Our county and the City of Palm Coast developed an interlocal agreement to create this committee and to have representatives from both jurisdictions on that committee. And recently, Councilmember Hyder joined the group, and Commissioner Andy Dance also sits on the committee as well. And I'll talk a bit more about what it's comprised. But again, the group submits an annual report of recommendations to their governing boards or councils concerning policies and procedures that impact affordable housing in our community. The committee is comprised of 8 to 11 members, and here's kind of a list of different groups that are intended to be represented on the committee. Again, we have electeds from both Palm Coast and the county on that group, as well as representatives from a variety of other areas. The committee is chaired by Ms. Sandra Shank and vice chaired by Mr. Neelan Joseph. And then again, you can see the rest of the committee members, their appointment dates, and the like in terms of the composition of the committee. This is a very robust and active group that is committed and very engaged in addressing this issue. So we're very thankful for all of their participation. It's a purely volunteer and committed group. This next slide is one of 2 slides that just lists the various types of incentives that the state puts forth for consideration. The Affordable Housing Advisory Committee must review all of these incentives. We don't have to adopt policies on each one, but we have to review these and consider them on that committee. I won't go through each one because we'll talk a little bit more in a moment about specific incentives that we'll be adopting and proposing. But again, there's a list of about 10 incentives that the state asks us to look at. And this is everything from inclusionary zoning, flexible lot configurations. Again, you can see the different opportunities there. But it really is meant to provide a menu of ideas for communities to consider in furthering the opportunities for affordable housing. So with that, I'll turn it over to Devry, who's going to talk about our local housing assistance plan and, again, some of the incentives and work of the committee.
Thank you. I'm Devry Paradowski, Housing Services Program Manager for Flagler County Housing Services. So the recommendations that the committee made, they will help us to update the local housing assistance plan. The local housing assistance plan is updated in two ways. There's the funds that we implement with the SHIP funds that we receive on behalf of the city of Palm Coast and for Flagler County. And we update the plan to spend that money every 3 years, and then the committee will update they provide their recommendations every year now. All right. So just to kind of briefly give you an overview, if you look at the local housing assistance plan, section 3 has the incentives for both Flagler County and for the city of Palm Coast. And then when you flip to that side, this screen is showing you what it looks like when you flip to it. We're going to streamline some of this a little bit just to make it a little bit more tangible to the public and to elected officials so they know what we have in the plan. And anybody that's watching this or any of the elected officials here today can visit floridahousing.org. And they can view every single county's local housing assistance plan, including Flagler County and the City of Palm Coast local housing assistance plan. So just to give you a backdrop, this is really the last slide, and I think Mr. Papa was going to explain the incentives. But we want to just let you know that the committee they meet monthly, so it's a standing committee. And they did hold a public hearing per statute on November 15th and voted by majority vote to adopt the incentives that they would recommend to. Some for the county are different than the ones that they recommended for the city of Palm Coast. So once they are accepted by the council, the report is accepted, then the staff will have 90 days. We'll update the local housing assistance plan that will have just the incentives, the way that we plan to move forward with those recommendations in that plan, and then we'll bring it back for adoption. And then we submit it to the state, and then we're in compliance once we do that to receive our funds for the next year. And I think that's
That's the end of what we had to share with you, but again, Ms. Papa, did you want to dive into the actual incentives? Or?
Yeah, there was just, on the left, move to the next slide.
Okay, thank you.
So this last slide just shows some of the recommendations from the AHAC to the city of some potential incentives. And again, I think we're just at the stage where we can just consider these. There's no final, this doesn't mean that you are going to do this, but just allows us time to investigate and see if there is a workable proposal or system that can be implemented by the city. If we look at the 3 items here, develop a planned affordable development ordinance consistent with the county's ordinance. What the county did was adopt that planned affordable development, which establishes how long does a unit have to be affordable in order to qualify as an affordable unit, and other regulations in there that basically allows a particular developer, if they're saying they're doing workforce or affordable housing, how's that defined? And this ordinance creates that definition. The county has adopted one. It's one that the city can investigate and look at as we move forward. The second bullet item is one that's fairly simple. We're able to inventory lands that, in this case, what's missing here is that surplus lands under ownership by the city. So, we might have a single-family lot that we acquired through code enforcement liens. If that land is usable for affordable housing or workforce housing, let's say for a new single-family home, then that should be published out on the web page, and someone like Habitat for Humanity can look at it and say, you know what, we'll take that and we'll develop a single-family unit on it. So, and the third bullet here, consider adoption of Affordable Housing Trust Fund for the purpose of funding affordable housing development incentives. Very wide topic of potential programs that could be. It could be a community land trust. It could be something like inclusionary zoning, where you dedicate a certain percentage of your residential development for workforce housing. We don't know what the implications or how that would work within the city of Palm Coast at this time. So again, just potential probably to investigate moving forward, especially with the update of our comprehensive plan, maybe looking at our housing policies more comprehensively and thoroughly, and see where we might be able to address some of the affordability issues in the city within the context of updating our comprehensive plan and moving forward with that. So these are the recommendations. These are not going to establish policies that we now have to follow. It allows us to move forward and investigate.
Just an informational question. So the SHIP program has a sister program, the SAIL program. Is that considered separately, differently, or at all in the county?
The state administers the SAIL program, so that comes from the state housing trust fund, and then we get we get money from the local housing
Okay,
trust fund.
and the SAIL program has to do with rentals as opposed to home ownership. It appeals to where it's created for folks that are in the rental property category as opposed to actual home ownership. Okay, so that's different stream, but also considered by your committee or not?
The SAIL?
Yeah.
No, just
Not
the
at all.
local funds that we receive for SHIP.
Okay, interesting. Very good. Okay. Questions?
No real questions, really. Thank you for your recommendations, but, well, the inventory of surplus lands, I would think that as a city, if we have an inventory of surplus lands, we would want to really sell it to the highest bidder to make money for our budget. So I'm not in favor of just giving away property, if that's what that means, and I'm not quite sure what this really means. If you could put a little more detail into this, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I'm not thoroughly familiar with what surplusing lands for affordable
You
housing.
mentioned a lot.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's just an example of one. I'd have to look back into state statutes as to how that's, I believe that there are some state statutes that might actually, I don't want to say the word mandate, but sort of pushes the city to offer it for workforce or, depending on how it was acquired. That if it was acquired, let's say through a tax lien.
Sure.
Offering it to a workforce housing provider, I believe there might be something in state law that requires that. I'm speaking completely way off my comfort of knowledge regarding that. But certainly, if city has acquired parcel through, if we purchased a property, I'm sure that that's probably one that where it's appropriate for the city to recover its investment in that parcel. But I would have to look more closely at it. And again, Councilman, this is something that we can further investigate again as we update it, again, the comprehensive plan. But the way just that the state statutes is written, we're to inventory and identify if it's suitable for housing, regardless of what might be its highest and best use, or whether it's appropriate for surplusing.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know offhand what the county ordinance is that you're referring to, the number by chance? If not, it's okay, but if you happen to know it.
No, I don't know it offhand, but it may be referenced if the local housing, I don't know if the local housing assistance plan was added to this, but it is referenced in the local housing assistance plan, that the ordinance number.
Okay.
For the planned affordable development, yes.
We'll get you the number, Councilman.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for the presentation and your work on this.
Excuse me.
Okay.
I think Councilman Danko kind of hit on the same question that I was going to ask about the surplus land. Because as I read through the agenda this morning, I did notice in the agenda that this was the long agenda. They talked about surplus land and what parcels were available, I believe, in Flagler County. However, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, they said that this land was for nonprofit use. Am I correct on that?
So
It
there is,
mentioned something about this surplus land being used for nonprofit use.
yes, so the recommendation is for these to be, whatever the city finds suitable for affordable housing per statute. So that would have to happen first, and then those lands would be used for nonprofit developers as identified by the city.
Okay, so what you're saying is that this land is not land that's going to be sold to the highest bidder, or is it land that's going to be given out for use for affordable housing?
My understanding of the statute is that it mainly requires identifying. It doesn't dictate actual sale versus development versus, how you prioritize that type of decision. Again, my understanding is that it mainly is to identify and see the potential of sites. It doesn't require that it be sold to a nonprofit versus a private developer per se.
Okay. Okay, I'll probably go into this a little bit further with you because I am on the Affordable Housing Committee, so I'm sure that I'm going to have more questions about it. Thank you.
Councilman?
I have no further questions, but I do thank you for the presentation and also Councilwoman Hyder's role on the different boards. I appreciate it, and thank you for being involved in this. And as always, I appreciate Jose's input, or Mr. Papa's input into all of this, and thank you guys for coming and giving the presentation today.
And I would just conclude by the process that you described today is a much more robust process than when I chaired that committee some years ago. And kudos to Mr. Papa and yourselves for getting a process in place so that we are at least able to ask the right questions, which I think some of them definitely been asked today, and that certainly at the county, they're taking note of these ad hoc recommendations, and the city will as well. So thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move to agenda item F, which is our final public participation of the morning. Are there any members of the public that would like to address City Council at this time, please?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I had not come for the intent of standing at the podium today, but I did come to see and listen to the strategic plan to get an idea of what's going on in the city that I live in. By the way, my name is Mike Fellmauer. I do live in Palm Coast. One of the items that I heard brought up, and just to give your whomever will be working on it some additional information, was bringing I think it was the 7th grade to do a mock city council. If anybody's looking for help, that maybe they, even though we don't have our own YMCA here, the YMCA has had a youth and government program for over 70 years nationwide, which helps promote these types of projects. And it ran at, I can relate to it 58 years ago when I was part of it. At that point in time, it was more high school on, and we started with taking over the city government for a weekend, then moving into our state government at a later date, or actually our county and then state, where we actually sat in our state government housing for a weekend and doing all that and learning. So it's a great experience. I think it's a great idea. And maybe we can contact the Y in some fashion to see if they'd be willing to come in and help us do that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Any other members of the public like to address City Council at this time? Seeing no one come forward, I will close the public participation. And now, is there any additional discussion by City Council members for today's meeting? Yes, sir.
I do have one
Yep.
thing. Over the holiday weekend, I received this lovely card And I just want to read it, and this is not self-serving, which you'll come to understand once I get to the end of it. It was addressed to me, and it said, Ed, congratulations on being vice mayor. Your loyalty to Palm Coast residents has paid off. I'm looking forward to working with you in the future, Ed. Again, congrats and well-deserved. And it's signed Best, Al Cryer, Safety on Cimarron. And during the holidays, when he sent this, he passed away during the holidays. And I just want to say that Al was a remarkable man, and he really, really loved this city of Palm Coast. He is a person that will be missed here. He attends virtually every meeting, and we're trying to work on the situation on Cimarron and other streets, and I hope we all keep Al in our prayers and in our heart. And I know we have, it's hard to honor people sometimes. I would hope someday if we build a sidewalk on Cimarron, we name it after Al. But I do know we have trails that in our city that are not named yet. And with the consent of this council, I'd like to ask our city manager to look into one of those trails and come back with a possible recommendation where we could honor this incredible man. It's a great loss for our city. That's all I have.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I received a similar card with very kind sentiment from Mr. Cryer, and he will be sorely missed, and I pray for his family and friends and peace for them as they mourn his loss. I share also your thought of, I began working with Denise on the process for naming something after him, so hopefully we can definitely get that done. I think it's more than warranted. He was a wonderful man. So my sincere condolences. I also do want to just thank Mr. DiLorenzo and also Mr. Papa. I had asked for things in the last city council meeting that were followed up on and given to me, and so I want to voice my appreciation for that accountability.
Thank you. Councilperson Hyder?
Yes, I too would just like to offer my condolences to Al Cryer's family. And at the last council meeting, he came to me. Well, I had also received a congratulations card from him, which was so nice. And also he came to me at the last council meeting, and he said, Mrs. Hyder, he introduced me to his wife and another lady that was with him. I would love for you to come and visit me at my home. And sadly, during the holidays, I called him to try to set up a meeting with him to visit at his home, and I really did not find out that he had passed away until I met with our city manager, Denise Bevan, yesterday. So my heart goes out to the family, and I'm along with Assistant Mayor Danko that we should absolutely find a way to honor him and hopefully do something on Cimarron Drive in his honor. He worked so hard towards that project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilperson. Councilman?
I would also echo those same remarks. Al was a great friend. He was also a tremendous individual, and he was also quite the character at the golf course, and everybody loved him at the golf course too. He was a tremendous guy. He was a friend, and I'll certainly miss him. In addition to that, I would just like to say Happy New Year. I'm looking forward to working with every single one of our council members collaboratively, and I think this is a great first step with our strategic action planning and our workshop today. And Happy New Year, and let's get going.
And just in conclusion, the way I started today, you know, there is a lot of bad stuff going around in the air, so please, everybody, a healthy and happy New Year. Let's take care of ourselves. And I want to thank each of our council members. I am even more optimistic at the end of the meeting than as optimistic I was at the beginning, so I look forward to a wonderful year, and thank you, City Manager, for facilitating all of this, so thank you. With that, I'll ask City Attorney, any final comments?
I have nothing.
And City Manager?
I have nothing today. Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. With that, I would entertain a motion.
Make the motion.
I have a motion.
Oh, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.